Hi everyone, thanks again for joining me for another Allan Holdsworth lesson video. Today I'm going to be doing the second half of the Unmerry-Go-Round, focusing on the swell section and the really nice middle section. And I was kind of excited about this video and kind of dreading it because there are going to be a lot of chords, and I don't know how long this video is going to be. I know they've been kind of getting up there, but I have a feeling this video is going to be very long, so I'm going to try to not talk too much about any one particular subject, and I just got to keep on moving forward. So without further ado, here's the swell section of the Unmerry-Go-Round. Alright, so how I view this sort of middle section is there's like an intro of the swell section, and then there's the main melody part. That melody part then gets repeated again without the swell, and it's almost identical. There's just like an extra chord in there. So I'm going to talk about that when we get to it, but really focusing on that swell part because I'm not going to be spending too much time on all the chords again, just how they're sort of different. Then there's a little solo section, and then there's like a slight ending. So I'm going to be talking about all those parts. So I also got my magic stomp going, so I can do some of the swell stuff, so it'll sound a little bit more authentic. So the first part of the swell section starts off with the previous chord, which is that D minor chord. Oh, gotta work this volume pedal. So starts with the D minor, then it goes to A minor, D minor to A minor again. And this is where it's different. The book is actually pretty close to this, but I had gone through my transcription again, and I realized I was a little off. This version makes so much more sense because if you've watched any of my other videos, I've talked about this before. Allan loves to play these kind of triads. This would be an F major, and like this would be a C major. And he likes to put the root, well, not really the root, but the lowest voice, and the doubling it on the high E string. And I said this before, he does this a lot in The Things You See, in Metal Fatigue. He doesn't really do it later in his career, more like an early in his career kind of thing, so it's fitting here. So after those two minor chords, you're then going to play a F major to a major here. And then it's very, very brief. It's really hard to hear, but you just hear a little, which is a C sharp major. Kind of like how I did this in Funnels. That chord is in there as well, Funnels. So the next section is really beautiful. This type of chord is really excellent for voice leading, and you'll see here because Allan's almost playing almost like a scale going up, but he's changing the chord underneath, making it transition between different keys. It's really beautiful sounding. So the first chord is actually D major, then to E major, and then you spread out your first and third finger, and then you have a G sharp major, F sharp major, then you spread your first and third finger out again and get B flat major to G major, and then you move your first, your first finger and second finger down, and then you get this B major. So with the swell effect, this is what it's going to sound like. Whoops. There we go. Beautiful. So that only happens there, and then from this point on comes the actual chord melody section. So there's going to be a lot of chords in here and a lot of discussion. So at this point, I'm going to actually talk about how Allan thinks of chords, because if you don't want to watch this and just want to learn how to play that part, you can skip this next section. But this next section is going to talk about how Allan thinks of chords and how I sort of derived some of the names from them. So So let's do that now. Alright, so now it's time to talk about how Allan thinks of chords and why naming them is so tough. So, the way that chords are built, and also by the way, for anybody, you might actually have heard all this stuff before, I'm just reiterating it for anyone that might not be familiar with it, or even how chords are built, etc. So just bear with me. Chords are really built from every other note of the scale, which is what we call tertiary harmony. And all the names that we give these chords are really built from that. Major 7, minor 7. It all has to do with a specific interval structure that we use to build chords. The first, third, fifth, and seventh note of the scale. So all of our names, those traditional major 9, minor 9, dominant, all are all named that way because of traditional harmony, that tertiary harmony. Now, the way that Allan thinks of chords is not traditional at all. In fact, here in his REH video, he talks about how he thinks of chords, so I'm going to play that clip now.
People ask me a lot about chords and the way I think about chords. And the way I do think about chords is I just think of them as being, say, members of a family. And I think of a 4-note chord, for example, which most guitar chords are, as just being 4 members of a family. Say you have imagine a seat with 8 family members on it, and you say, 4 stand up, Stephen, George, Sarah, Winston, or whatever, stand up, and then you take a picture of those, and that's that particular chord. But they're all members of that one family. So when I hear chords moving from one chord to another, I don't just hear the static voicing of that one particular chord, although that may be important in a head, say, for example. I see it more as being the families that change as you change from one chord to the next. So I just think of chords as being based on scales. So I try to hear the scale shapes move, you know, from one family to the next as the chords go by.
So as you can see, he thinks of the chords as just parts of a family and not of a scale family, not in a traditional way. This could be real confusing because to Allan, it doesn't make a difference what order those notes can be in, whether it's 1, 3, 5, 7, or you can switch them around in different inversions, which means you're still taking the same note, but you're not putting the root on the bottom. Your lowest note is either the 3rd or the 5th, or even in some cases the 7th, which I know I've talked about here. 3rd inversion, 1st inversions, so where you start on the 3rd, the 2nd inversions when you start on the 5th, and the 3rd inversions when you start on the 7th. So because of that, we can kind of make these chords more manageable, but when you deviate from that and add notes in there that are not done in that tertiary fashion, like I'm going to take the 1st, the 2nd, the 5th, and the 6th note of my scale and then play that diatonically up and down, that's where things get really hairy because we're not following that traditional chord name structure. So I'm going to just cut to the chase. The first 2 chords of this section are this. So naming these chords are really tough because, like I said, in a traditional way, we build these chords from the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, usually the root being the lowest note. Most harmony works from the bottom up, the lowest note being really the foundation of what chord or what harmony it is that you're playing, and then all the other notes on top of it are your extensions, or your alterations, but ultimately that lowest note really gives the foundation of what that harmony should be, whether it's like an F or something, or a C. That low note is usually on the bottom. Sometimes you can change it and you can have the major 3rd on the bottom, that's like our inversions, but once you start coupling that with non-tertiary harmony, then things start to get really wacky. So that first chord, trying to name it, I had some difficulty with. So let's just move up. I'm just going to move from here to here. Just a half step up because it'll be easier to see. So when I first saw this chord, I'm looking at its structure and I see, alright, I got a 5th, the 6th, and then my 4. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe this is a 6 sus 4, which is a totally legit chord. You can also think of it, if you just look at the notes, we have a C, E, and a G. We have a C major chord in second inversion because the fifth of the chord is the lowest note and the root is actually the highest. And if we add this D in there, we have a really nice C add 9 voicing, which is how I think of it. Now the problem is, when you take these chords and then you start playing them diatonically, those shapes move around and you start getting names that don't really make sense, or the name of the chord sounds more dissonant than what the chord really is. So that next chord that I played up here is really that same chord, but now with this C played up here to C sharp. So if this is a C major with an add 9, now I'm taking that C and moving it to C sharp. So now I have a C sharp, an E, and a G. That's a diminished triad, and then I'm adding in a D, which is the flat 9 of C sharp. So this is a diminished, a C sharp diminished with an added flat 9. To me, I don't hear that at all, because that's also a very dissonant chord. I hear this G is my root again. But now, if I think of it as that 6 sus4 chord, which to me makes more sense, the problem is there is no such thing as a sharp, as a sus sharp 4 chord. This is something that I actually thought about throwing out there as possibly like a new type of chord name, and it's something that you see often. You see a lot of times a major chord, and then instead of a sus4 like this, where you're adding in an F and you get that resolution, you sometimes see F sharp, which is the sharp 4 or sharp 11. But there's no name for that as far as I know. I've never heard of that. So I was thinking about maybe calling this a 6 sharp 4 sus sharp 4 chord, just completely creating a new chord. So I thought this would be very controversial. So I had asked a couple of my friends. Now I'm no genius. I just make sure that I want to get everything as right as possible for my own self-respect. But I don't think I have all the answers. So luckily I have a few friends who I respect very highly, and I like to ask them their opinion and then build from there. So the first person that I asked was my friend Andre. I think his last name is Orsel. If I say that wrong, I apologize. You're a cool dude. I love talking to you, but I'm terrible at names. So I threw that out there as, what do you think of a sus sharp 4 chord? And he kind of agreed with me, I think. I'm trying to remember, this was a few weeks ago. And we had like a nice conversation about it. And I took it to him and said, alright, that doesn't seem too weird. I had messaged the other guitar player in my band, Greg, who he does the Anger videos. He agreed with me also with that 6 sharp sus4 chord, or that sus4 chord. So I said, alright, maybe this isn't as bad as I thought. So then I talked to my friend Joe Britton, who in my opinion is the best transcriber I've ever met. His transcriptions are always excellent, and his musical insight is excellent too. So I had asked him about the same chord, and he said, well, I've actually thought of it as like a 13th chord. And I said to myself, I didn't really see it like that. Let me go and take a look at it. So I went back and I looked at those chords, and by God, he was absolutely right. And that's where I started thinking this would be really great to not only talk about the way that Allan thinks of chords, but because it doesn't fit a 13th chord perfectly, I can use another lesson video that I've seen. Some of you might have heard this guitar player. I believe his name is Juan Dhas. I hope again I'm saying it right. He's a phenomenal guitar player, and is one of the few guitar players who when I watch him I go, yeah, I can't do that. Usually guitar players inspire me. He makes me want to put my guitar down. But he had this great lesson video about tension substitution. So this first chord that I had played, let's move it down to back to C again. So you can think, if G is your root, you can think of it as a G6 sus4 chord. But of course it doesn't really work with this one diatonically as you move up and down the scale. You have to change the name a little bit, so you have that G6 sus sharp 4 chord. Or if you think of it as a C with an add 9, C major with the add 9, then you have a C sharp diminished with an added flat 9, and that's not really a dissonant sounding chord. I mean, it should, the name tells me it should be much more dissonant than it really is. But then we have, if you think of it from E, we have an E, a G, and then we have a D, which is really the 3 components of an E minor 7 without the 5th. And a lot of you guys, you might be familiar with jazz stuff, that the fifth is the least important note in a chord, could usually be omitted. And the way that I like to think of chords is the chord name really tells you the most important notes in there. And a lot of times, like, the fifth is not important. So for example, if I saw a C major 7, to me the most important notes are the major third and the seventh, and of course the root, but if you're playing with a bass, that's optional, and of course the fifth, not important. Or if you have like a major 13 chord, I'm thinking the major third, the major seventh, and the 13. All the other notes are basically optional and can be removed. Sometimes in particular voicings you can use them or not, but that'll have to be written out. It's just those to me are the most important tones. So if I see that as a minor, as a minor 7, and then I'm adding this note on top, this C, we have a minor with a flat 13. And this actually is built from an interesting voicing, which I only have 10 minutes of recording time before it shuts off. I'm going to just do a quick cut and talk about that here. So this kind of minor chord comes from this, which is really a minor 7, E minor 7, because now I'm adding in a B. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this voicing shape diatonically across all the strings. So the first chord, if we were thinking of it as F, we have an F major 7 here. And then if I move this shape up the F major scale diatonically, we'd have all the seventh chords fit there. So we have F major 7, G minor 7, A minor 7, B flat major 7, G dominant 7, D minor 7, and then we have E minor 7 flat 5, and then back to F major 7. If you want to play it on the middle 4 strings, the root is still the root's going to be on the G string now. Let's try it in C, because it'll be easier for me to conceptualize. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7, B minor 7 flat 5, and then finally G major 7, which I don't have enough room on this guitar to do. You get the idea. Then you can take those notes and bring them down to your top 4 strings. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7, B minor 7 flat 5, back to C major 7. Now this is interesting because Allan actually uses the same voicing in his REH video, as you can see here. So in that REH video, he just shows the top structure of this, but I play them across all the three groups of strings there. Like I said, a lot of chords. Now in the Juan Dhas video, he has a great lesson in chord substitutions, or just adding more interesting notes to your chord. And I think that's the best and easiest way of trying to describe some of Allan's chords. It's with tension substitution. So briefly, what tension substitution is, or what he calls in his video, is you have the 1, 3, 5, and 7, your first, third, fifth, and seventh note. You can't do this to the seventh, but you can take the first note and move it to the next degree in the scale and keep the other chords the same. The same thing with your third would go to the 4, or your fifth would go to the 6th. And that's actually what's happening in this part. If we take the, let's take that F major 7, and the fifth is here, this C. If we want to use that tension substitution, that C is going to be an A. And now we have this chord. This is the shape that you're going to see mostly in that next section, and this is why I'm calling a lot of these chords 13th chords, because I'm building them from this particular interval structure. You would have your third, your fifth, your root, your third, your seventh, your root, and then the top note would be your 13th, and then you could play that diatonically. I'm probably going to mess this up a little bit, but I'm going to name all the chords here. So F, these are all built from that voicing that we did before, but now I'm replacing the 5th with the 13 or the 6th of that particular scale degree that I'm on. So we're on the 1, so that's got a 6. So this is an F major 13. Your second chord is would be a G minor 7. That has a 6 in it, which is the chord that I just played before earlier in the song that I had trouble with. So this is more like a minor 13. So we have F major 13, G minor 13. The next one would have a flat 6. So it's a G minor 7, I'm sorry, A minor 7 with the flat 13. The next one, B flat major 13, it's C, we'd have a C dominant triad, but now we have a 13 in there, which is this. Instead of before we had that, now we're replacing the 5th with the 13. Then we're going to go to the 6th chord, which is D minor, which has the flat 13. Then we're going to go to our 7th chord, which actually has a flat 13, because remember, we're replacing the 5th degree, so the 5th in this would be the flat 5, which is B flat. We're moving it up to A. So we have a hidden minor 7 with the flat 13, and then we go back to our root. So we can apply that to all the strings now. This is where I'll probably mess it up here, and you'll see some of the stretches are really crazy. I'm going to do this in C again. So C major 13, D minor 13, E minor 7 with the flat 13, F major 13, G dominant 13, A minor 7 with the flat 13, B minor 7 with the flat 13, and then back to C major, major 13. And you can do that on, once again, the top 4 strings. This time I'm not going to say them because it's the same chords as before. There you go. Amazing. I don't think I screwed that up. I'll find out when I edit the video. But all of those chords, a lot of those chords, you're going to see those voicings used in the next section. So that's why I consider all of those kind of 13 chords, which once again I thank Joe Britton for letting me see. But also now you can think of using those chords in a different way, or using tension substitution, and you'll see that a lot of those, if you try to figure them out yourself, you'll get a lot of very Allan-esque voicings, because for the most part a lot of his chords are just 4-note chords, so why not replace one of those notes with another note in the another degree within the scale. So that's it, and that's how Allan thinks of chords. We're trying to name them in a conventional way, which is tough, so we have to sort of use tricks, whereas to Allan, it makes no difference. If you just took your hands and you just slammed a bunch of white keys on the piano, we might be all trying to argue what the name of that chord is or what you hear. To Allan, it makes no difference. It's all in C. And that's what he's always saying. So his approach is very, very simple, but trying to name it in our traditional way is tough, because it's not traditional. It doesn't matter what order the notes are in, and it doesn't matter. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter what notes that you're choosing, or what, if you're using tertiary harmony or not. You pick a voicing that you like, and you can play it up and down at the scale that you're in. But trying to name them in a traditional way is very tough, because as you can see, you can take like this chord, and you can name it 3 different ways. Is it a now I hear this as an add 9, and I would suggest if you are going to use it as an add 9. The only reason why in this video I don't is because it makes the other chords make less sense, in my opinion. So I want to keep the same interval structure throughout, and a lot of these chords are really built from that 13th voicing. So that's it. That's my spiel, and now we're going to go into actually playing the thing. So let's do that now. Alright, so if you got through that whole thing with me, thank you very much. That was a lot of words, and hopefully it wasn't too confusing. If you got any questions, obviously you just write them and I'll try to help clear them. Or if you've got another way of thinking about them, I'm all ears. This is all basically like interpretive. What's important is, to me, the actual voicing. So this song is actually one of those that it's easier for me to play than it is to name all the chords. Alright, so this is the swell section. I'm not going to have the swell on. I'm just going to go through the chords and then I'll put the swell on afterwards. So once again, you'll see a lot of those kind of voicings that I was talking about before. So the first chord is an E flat minor 7 with a flat 13. I also got a little cheat sheet over here just in case I mess up, because there's a lot of chords and I have a feeling I'm going to mess at least one of them up. So I apologize in advance if that happens. This chord is also really tricky, and I might have said this in my top 10 chord video. A lot of times it's easier to almost play with the side of your hand than it is to try to play straight on. So if you're going to try to play this chord, try to almost play with the side of your fingertips like this, and it'll be easier to reach because almost all of these chords have a fifth in the bottom. So that first chord, E flat minor 7, the flat 13. Or you can think of this as a sharp 5 chord. This is also important too. I'm keeping it as the flat 13 because it's the 13, or the 6 is being used in each one of these chords. It gets a little ambiguous where is it a sharp 5 or is it a flat 13. Once again, it's up to you. I probably would call this normally as a minor 7 sharp 5, but only because all the other chords make more sense as that note being the 6th. I'm keeping it all standard as much as possible. So E flat minor 7 with the flat 13, A minor 13, then you have this chord, which is now doesn't use that structure at all, which is really kind of like a G major 9, because you have this, but then also Allan's playing another G and a B, which is over here, G and a B. So these two notes aren't really adding anything. And if you see, this top half of the chord is very similar. Actually, it's not similar. It is the same chord that's in Water on the Brain. I can't play it up here, but... And he called those all major 7 chords. But they're really the major 9 chords. I'm sorry, I played it wrong. It's a little tricky again, because you got to get your middle finger on this G while your third and fourth finger over here. Then it moves to another G minor 13. Then you have this chord, which is not diatonic from what we did before. It's the same interval structure. It's actually a 13 chord, but now we're flatting the 13 here. We have a flat 6. So what is that really? It's actually a 7 sharp 5 chord, which is more of a melodic minor thing. So I would say this is an F sharp 7 sharp 5 to a E minor 13 to an E flat minor 7 flat 13 to same voicing as up here. This is a B flat 7 sharp 5. Little bit of a break here. G major 7 to F sharp minor 7. Now there's alternate ways you could play it. I think that's the way Allan's doing it. Now he never played this live. There is a clip, an audio clip of him doing the swell section in one of his live performances. I think during that little guitar cheese part, that's his opportunity to write these kind of things, and sometimes they appear in songs. Like I think there's a part in Sand that he did that. So any of the real swell sections, the beginning of Material Real, I think was something he just played by himself and then eventually wrote a song around. So it's hard to say how exactly it is that he's playing some of these voicings, because they could be either or. If it makes more sense, you can still play the G major and then the F sharp on the top, which I'll do because it makes it easier for my hand. And then you basically have the F sharp minor with the open E string, and then you can do the same thing, because now you have this chord, but you can utilize the open E string. So you have a G sharp 7 sharp 5. So you can play that part like this. And then move on to the next part. I think it makes more sense the way Allan thinks, because he's even admitted he very rarely uses open chords. Like that. And then finally the next chord is F sharp minor 13, and then F minor 7 flat 13. So that's what I consider the A section. This part sort of goes A, B, A, C. So that's the A section. The B section is completely different and unique. The first chord is a B flat minor 7 with the flat 13 or sharp 5. Then this, which is your F sharp, D flat major with an added add 9. I'm sorry, yeah. And then yeah. Then you have this, which is kind of unusual. I would probably think of this as an E major add 9 add 11 chord. We have E, G sharp and B, and then our 11, and then the 9. So I think an E major add 9 add 11. Then we move up to A minor 13, once again with that tension substitution. Instead of A minor 7, you're replacing the 5th with the 13 or the 6. And then A flat minor 7 sharp 5 or A minor 7 with the flat 13. F sharp minor 13. But now you take the 6 and you move to the 5. So this is just really like a F sharp minor 7. Then you move all the way to this, which is an F minor 7 with the flat 13. Once again, we did this voicing in the part before. Then it goes to a B minor 13. Now you take the minor third here, that D, and you move it down a half step. I think this is the way Allan's playing it. You could play this on the middle 4 strings, but it's a little tricky. Same thing with this. You could play this part like I think this, but then the other part's even higher. So, and it sounds sharper. So I'm guessing it's played on these groups of strings. So now you move that flat 3 to the 2, and now you have a B13 sus2. Then you have this, which is a C major with an add sharp 11. I'm sorry. But then Allan's tapping a D here. Once again, it's really tough to know what's going on here because you're just using your ears. It's possible he's playing it another way, but I'm pretty sure that note's being tapped. Then A flat minor 7 with a flat 13, and then an E flat minor 7. E flat 7 flat 9, and then Allan plays a G again. So that part, after that's done, goes back to the A section exactly the same. Speeding through it a little bit. Then comes the C section, which is starts with a B add 9, then a D major 7 sharp 11, D flat major add 9. Now this is where it's tough. I think Allan's playing this particular voicing of the major 7 sharp 11, G major 7 sharp 11, and then playing the minor 7 sharp 5 over here. It's possible he might be doing this voicing. Once again, it's whatever makes you feel more comfortable. Then from there, it's sort of like the other section before, the A section, because now you have this D minor 13, C major add 9, C minor 13 to B minor 7 with the flat 13. Then you move these 2 fingers up a half step, and now you have a C minor 6, C, E flat, G, and then you have your A here, which is your 6. Back to B, B minor 7, flat 13. Then this, which is more like an A minor 7. You have an A, you have a C, and you have a G, but you have no E. Once again, you can omit the 5. And then finally, G major add 9. Wow, a lot of chords. So hopefully you get that down because a lot of it repeats with very minor alterations in the next section. So I'm just going to clip the video here, and now I'm going to play through it with the swell so you can hear how it sounds. Just absolutely one of the most gorgeous things he's ever written, in my opinion. And I wish this appeared more in his live sets. Just unreal voice leading, beautiful, everything. Just gorgeous. Alright, so now the next section that I'm going to do is basically that entire thing with some little alteration, so I'm going to do that now. So that whole swell section repeats almost identically, but there are a little few details in there that I'm going to talk about now, so I'm just going to rip right through that song. At least that part. Starts off the same way, but now it's got a little more melody. Stuff like this, you know. Now here is where I think it's a little different. I think it starts the same way, but then Allan takes his pinky off and then adds his pinky to play that E, because that E isn't really that strong in terms of, it's not like, it doesn't sound like an open E, it sounds a little bit more lighter. So I think that's how he's doing it. Once again, you can play it however you think is more comfortable, whether it's like this. I probably would do that just because it's just easier for my hand, but I think the way that Allan's doing it is and then it goes to the B section. Here's a little bit of a variation now. Instead of this, you have this little melody. So you're playing the chord, 4 notes on the bottom, the F sharp, using your middle finger to play G sharp, and then a B, and then playing the high E, and then to the next chord, the A flat minor 7 sharp 5. Here's a little bit different as well. Before, Allan just does this, but here you're actually doing that F minor 13 thing. But then now you're switching to F, and you're adding the flat 6 and releasing that tension to the well, it's not really that much tension, but releasing it to the 5, and then playing the G sharp and then the C, making it a F minor 7. Everything's the same here. Now I think on the album version, Al's going sorry, and then using his pinky to tap the note like that. And then over this chord, Allan before just played a G, but I think here you're actually using your 2 fingers to tap an E flat and a G and an E flat at the same time. Hard to hear. I hear those notes in there. Something like that. So then it goes back to the A section. Once again, speeding right through for your convenience. Now the next part with the C section. Here, he just ends on the B. Now it goes to the solo section. The solo section has slightly different chords in it, just for the different B section. It starts off with the same A section. There's also no guitar playing this, but this is what's implied. Taking the easy way out this time. This part is unique to the solo section. It starts off with the B flat minor 7 with the flat 13, but now it goes to E major 7 sharp 11 to an E flat major add 9, and then it jumps all the way up here, which I'm thinking he's probably not doing because he's not playing this on guitar, but this is what's implied. It's an A major 7 sharp 11, and then an A sharp minor 7 sharp 5 or flat 13. I'll play that part again. And then next chord just sounds like a bunch of like this. It's hard to hear because it's piano, but what I'm seeing is a G sharp, a D, a G, and a C, C sharp. And I analyze what Allan's doing, and Allan's playing, he's playing E half whole diminished there. So what I'm thinking is that he's thinking of this, we're not thinking of it, he's thinking of it as a E half whole diminished section. But if you want to think of E as your root, this is really a 13 with a flat sharp 9. So you have E, G sharp, D, and then C sharp, which is your 13, and then you're adding in G, which is your sharp 9. And over that chord, whatever it is, because Allan's not playing it on guitar, he's improvising, it's all E half whole diminished. That's the entire solo section that happens again, that same way. Then at the very end, this is the last part of it, it repeats the same way as the beginning, but now it's a little twist. Now Allan plays that D major, add 9, add 11. Basically from this chord that we played before, everything's moved down a whole step. It's now transposed down a whole step. So D major, add 11, yeah, D major, add 9, add 11. And then, oh, I lost my train of thought. Now it's that G minor 13 to F sharp minor 7 sharp 5 or flat 13. Now in the actual song, I think Allan's playing the melody on the guitar, the higher note on another guitar, because I'm hearing with that high note in there, and this just seems a little weird. So I don't think Allan's actually playing that on the guitar. I think that note is actually coming from another, an overdubbed guitar. With that note on the top. Then we have the E minor 13 to the E minor 13 to E minor 7, E flat minor 7 with the flat 13 to E minor 7, E flat minor 7. Once again, we're just playing the same thing, just a whole step down. So now we have a E flat minor 7 with the flat 13. Oops, sorry. A minor 13. A 13 sus2. And then finally the last chord is this, which is a B flat 7 sharp 11, and then you take your first finger and tap the 19th fret, producing a D, which is the major third, which is 7 sharp 11. So I'll play that section again. There you have it. I have no idea how long this video is, but I hope you stuck with me through all of it and potentially learn something and understand how Allan thinks of chords. Or if you want to skip that and just learn how to play this incredibly beautiful piece, that's fine too. I would like to see more people actually play this. The book has that part kind of close, kind of things are a little wrong there, but I'm pretty confident with the actual voicings. The placement of the fingers, well, that could be up to you. You might find something easier than I do, but that's it. And then the next video I'm going to do is another big favorite of mine. I'll keep that a surprise, but I see a lot of people do covers of this already, and they always do phenomenal jobs, but people asked for it, and at least voted for it, I should say, so why not? I'll do that one too. So thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.